Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is, it's a response to Elder Apostle Tahar's video, a land back. This is you Christians are clueless, and that includes Vocab Malone. And it was pretty much inspired through the Spirit by a comment that Elder Apostle Tahar read off of this video that Vocab Malone and this whole panel, they were having a debate, and the comment pretty much was, I forget the person's name, but they said when the Apostle Tahar read the comment, pretty much the individual said that nobody knows everything about the MOTB or something along those lines. And the reason why they made that statement, somebody that would make a statement like that, means that they don't know what the MOTB is. And this is pretty much the whole mindset of the plantation Christian community, that they don't know the scriptures. They can quote certain of them can quote scriptures. They can, if you get into a debate with somebody that don't really know the Bible, they can probably manipulate them. They can probably manipulate them. They probably can, trick people into getting into Christianity, which today is harder and harder to do because more and more Jakes, especially, are waking up to the deadness, you could say, of plantation Christianity. So that thing is losing steam and losing members. Pretty much they're hemorrhaging. They had a little cut, the cut was leaking out blood, but then eventually the cut got bigger and bigger. So now they're hemorrhaging, because that whole one trick pony, that one trick pony show that they had is no longer working. So now they have to step their game up. Thanks be to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai for putting the Spirit on his prophets, and on his people, the teachers, to go out there and teach and push this word out there, to all the camps that are pushing Israel, even though some of them have flaws, they are pushing Israel, I'll just leave it at that. So one of the first pieces that came to mind, the brother just posted it up on the comment board. But before I go to that one, I'm going to go to Amos 3. And the problem with these wacky-tacky Christians are that they are not prophets. If anything, they're false prophets. This is Amos 3:7. Surely the Lord power will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants, the prophets. So if the Lord reveals a secret unto his servants, the prophets, would not the prophets know what these things are? Because in the book of Deuteronomy 33, is it? No. Deuteronomy 29 and 29, I believe it is. Yep, it says, the secret things belong unto the Lord our power, but those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. And the Lord speaks to us through his prophets, and he reveals his secrets to his prophets, as we read here in Amos 3:7. The lion hath roared, who will not fear? The Lord power hath spoken, who can but prophesy? Right, because the word of the Lord is effectual. Once it enters into a person's mind, it causes an effect. It could either be positive or negative. So the other precept that came to mind, which the brother just posted on the comment board, was 1 John chapter 2 and verse 20. It says, but you have an unction. You have an unction. That's that eye salve from the Holy One. And you know all things. See? So the men of the Lord would know all things. They would know what the MOTB is fully. Not in part, not one camp has part of it, another camp has another part of it, and another camp has another part of it, and they form together like Voltron, and then all of a sudden those 3 different camps or 4 different camps with different doctrines, are coming together to put the MOTB thing together. No, the Most High is not divided, just like Yahweh Shai is not divided. There's one faith, and that's it. But you have an unction from the Holy One, and you know all things. All right? It says, I have not written unto you because you know not the truth, but because you know it, and that no lie is of the truth. So if your truth, what you call truth, has any part of lies in it, then it's not the truth. It may be a semblance of the truth, because even Satan knows the scriptures. Even Satan can quote things and make a doctrine and make it look pleasurable to whoever's listening. That's not a part of the elect. Just like plantation Christianity. I'm going to read this one. This is a good one, brother. Just put up Psalms 25:14. The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant. See, and this is what we're coming back to. We're coming back to that covenant. So one thing that Vocab Malone said, just before Elder Pastor paused the video to read this, was he said, what Pastor said, he's correct when he says that that's dealing with Satan, and it makes to make the people servants or something to that effect. He said, when you read about worshiping the beast, he said that was talking about Satan, I believe he said, and that shows someone being subservient or something along those lines. In other words, he was saying that it makes you a slave, which, like Elder Pastor said, he's correct. But what he didn't break down was he just made a blanket statement, and when you make a blanket statement, you have to explain what you mean, because a blanket statement is just a broad stroke, and that's what these wacky tacky Christians do, and that's what Esau does in general. Right, so check this out. I just looked it up just for the halibut. I looked up blanket statement. Blanket statements are never useful. They are nebulous, and nebulous is like cloudy. And often, let me just look it up. Yep, in the form of a cloud or hazy. All right. So they are nebulous and often send the wrong message. And this is what it is. See, the purpose of the white supremacist, plantation Christianity is for misdirection. Excuse me. Is for misdirection. And that's exactly what it's meant for. It's a misdirection to send those in the wrong direction so that they won't find their way, in the truth, or that if they happen to get the truth, they gaslight them so that they can question if this is really the truth, or question their devotion, or question their faith. You see? And this is why it's important to be rooted and grounded in the faith. So it says they are nebulous and often send the wrong message. They seed doubt and mistrust, and are usually intended to make a grand point about how right the person making the statement might be. Hence vocab in this case. They tend to be self-serving even when outwardly it doesn't appear that way. And that's exactly what the serpent did. And like Apostle said, he might just be that serpent in the garden. And that's what it's meant to do. It's meant for misdirection, because he never really explained it. He painted a broad stroke. He made a blanket statement and painted a broad stroke. And I didn't know that when I looked up blanket statement, it was going to say all of this, because that's a whole mouthful, buddy. Inside joke. But that's what he does. He leads you in misdirection. That's why when the brother brought out Daniel 7 and the other lesson Elder Pastor did, he quickly went to Revelation 1. But wait a minute, we're dealing with Daniel 7. Then it clearly states that the Most High's hair is pure, like the pure wool. But then he said it's talking about white. No, because there's different types of different color sheep. So they're not all white. But he's trying to misdirect. He's making a blanket statement so that people listening and even people that are teaching it can question their belief. Well, is that really saying that? And that's the whole purpose of the serpent. But they're going to do it in a way that, seems like, well, yeah, I don't know. He said it with such confidence, or he said it, in a way that makes sense. And that's where the simple get led away. The simple believeth every word. But that's why it says that if possible, if at all possible, they will deceive the very elect. But they can't deceive the elect. All right. Now, one thing he mentioned was, the beast, which he mentioned Satan, right? Now, the beast being Satan, when you read the scriptures in the book of Revelation, you have the beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns. So he has to identify who the beast is, who Satan is, and what this particular, MOTB is. Because when you go to the Greek, the M part of it is charagma, which means something imprinted, cut into. So he would have to explain what exactly that is. He would have to explain what the beast is. He would have to explain what does it mean when it speaks about Satan in Revelation 12 and other parts of Revelation. So there's a whole lot of explaining that he has to do. But what does he do? He throws a blanket over it. Yay, blanket. Inside joke. So let's go to Revelation 17, because there's times when visions are given. Sometimes there's certain parts of it that are explained, and sometimes it's not. And this is why the Lord says, surely the Lord power will do nothing, but he revealeth the secrets unto his servants, the prophets. So in the case of this particular beast that Vocab is speaking about, which is in the scriptures, the beast in Revelation 12 and 3, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon. And this great red dragon is also synonymous with the beast. Now, the dragon is the Roman Empire. When you update it till today, it's dealing with America being Rome, in the reincarnation. But it also a representation of the whole beast, because it says a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. In some places it calls it the beast. There it particularly calls it the great red dragon, because it's the whole beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. But then there's parts in Revelation where it just speaks about the dragon himself, and that's dealing with the Roman Empire. And that's why sometimes things can get a little tricky, because it's the same story, but you using different symbolisms. And those different symbolisms, if you don't understand what it's speaking about, can throw you off. Well, that's talking about this, and this talking about actual locusts, and then this part over here is talking about something else, but then this part over here is talking about something else, and you could get confused. But Revelation 13 and 1, and I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast. See, and this one just says a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the names of blasphemy. But here in Revelation 12 and 3 it says, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, behold, a great red dragon, because the dragon is known for its fierceness, right? And the reason why I call it red is because this is a conglomeration of nations coming together that are the Edomites. And the word Edom, or the name Edom, going back to the Hebrew word Adawam, means red. And the reason why it's great, because look at the empires from the first empire to the 7th empire to the last empire, which is the eighth, which is America. They have been great. And even today, those empires that ruled at one time are a part of the whole beast system now. Okay? And Vocab will not explain that because he does not know that. But the point in here is, it says having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Right? Then when you jump further down to the 7th verse, it says, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. So let's leave that. Let's go back to the 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Now, does the Bible identify these 7 heads and 10 horns? Well, yes, it does. This is why Revelation 17 comes into play. When you read from the first verse, it speaks about, it says the doom of Babylon, speaks about this harlot and the peoples, you know, and so on and so forth, and everything that is done, and that this particular whole is riding on the back of the beast, so on and so forth. And here it calls it what? Scarlet colored beast, which is also a word or another description for the word red, or the color red. Then it says over here, matter of fact, let me read this verse. Verse 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet colored beast, which this beast is the same beast that we've been reading out throughout Revelation, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns, to show you that it's identifying with the same beast. This one it calls it scarlet colored, and the other in Revelation 12 it called it the great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, but it's all a representation of the same. So when we jump down to the 9th verse, right, it says, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Now, when you understand what mountains are, sometimes when you read the word mountain, it's speaking about an actual mountain. But sometimes when you read about mountain or mountains, it's speaking about governments. Hills are smaller governments, mountains are greater governments. But sometimes when you read the scripture, it's talking about the actual it's talking about the actual mountain. In this case, it's not speaking about an actual mountain, because it's the angel, you know, breaking it down to the Apostle John of what these symbolisms are. And he says, and there are 7 kings. So these 7 mountains, because a king doesn't sit on a mountain, even though they say king of the mountain, he don't sit on a mountain governing a mountain or governing his people from that mountain. He sits in the highest part of his empire or government, ordering the people. So that's why it's a representation of a mountain. When today they have what, the G7, I believe it used to be G8, or was it always 7? I forget. I know it's G7 now, but I know that I believe Russia used to be a part of it, and they cut Russia out, so that's why now it's G7. And what that is top governments coming together for meetings, and when they have those type of meetings, they call it a summit, right? So now, what is a summit, right? Summit definition, right? It says the highest point of a hill or mountain. So you can't really, I mean, behind the scenes, you know, the highest are, you know, of this world are the international banking families, you know, which that would be like really the top of the government. But physically to the world, the highest peak of these hills or mountains or governments are the legislators. You know, you have premiers, you have presidents. You know, in the past you had czars. You know, you had, you know, Kaiser. I don't know if they still use, I don't think they still use that term anymore. You know, but you always had leaders of these nations. These are the top kings of those nations. And these are the ones that are committing fornication with the whore. Okay? Because they're not actual kings by title, but they're actual kings by the position that they hold and the sway that they hold over the people, because that's what the king did. He would rule over the people. So a summit is the highest point of a hill or mountain, and that's where you had the G7, which they will call them, see right here, summit meeting. So the summit meeting was the 7 top, I believe there used to be 8 top, that would rule or govern over their nation. And these were the top 7, or these are the top 7 governments coming together for this particular meeting. And that's why it's called a summit, or the mountain peak, or mountain top. So here in Revelation 17:9, the hearers of mine which have the wisdom, the 7 heads are 7 mountains, which are what? 7 governments ruled by, and it doesn't, and when it says king, it doesn't have to necessarily be an actual king. It's just the rulership as it is, because remember, in these times, especially dealing with America and dealing with these different sovereign nations, they pretty much were ruled by the people. They had sovereigns over them, but overall, the governments themselves, are ruled by the people, or supposedly ruled by the people. All right, so it's not actually 7 actual kings. It just happened to represent the 7, these 7 kingdoms, rulerships, being, over others, right? Hopefully you following along. So it says, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, or 7 governments, or 7 empires, on which the woman sitteth. Because remember, we read earlier in the 3rd verse that the woman sat upon a scarlet-colored beast, and and pretty much these other empires that fell are really propping America up. Because remember, America, which is compared or to this woman, she's the one that's ruling over all the kings of the earth. And if you are honest with yourself and you look at the geopolitics, or or just in general, that America runs the world, so to speak. That they're using America as the great patsy, as Anthony Hilder put it. They're using America as the great patsy. That's why she's sending aid to this one, she's sending aid to that one. But meanwhile, at home, you have poverty, you have famine, you have people that are not doing so well. But here it is, they're sending millions and billions of dollars in aid to other nations to help them when they're not even helping the people in their home. So they police the world because they run the world. This is that great city that rules over the kings of the earth. So then it says, and there are 7 kings, which is 7 rulerships. 5 are fallen, because at the time when the Apostle John had this vision, 5 of these empires were pretty much under the rule of the Roman Empire, because at the time when this was written, the Roman Empire was still in rulership, and they governed over these other nations. Because the first one of them is what? Greece. We know that the Greeks came and went because the Roman Empire absorbed them into their empire. So you had the Greeks, you had the Spanish, you had the French, Germania Major and Germania Minor, which that is a representation of the 5 that were fallen. And one is because by the time the Apostle John had this vision, the Roman Empire was still in power. And the other is not yet come. The other one that is not yet come was speaking about the British Empire. It says, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And that's exactly what he did. Because when they came into power, at one time they were an empire. They colonized different nations. Their pound, I believe it was the pound, even back then, the pound was the world reserve currency at the time. And in 1944, the American dollar became the world reserve currency, knocking them down, knocking the British Empire down. So America became that head, right? So remember, these were 7. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, because America, who was in the vision, of the Apostle John, it was not actually there, but he actually saw it in a vision afar off. And they are the eighth, meaning that you had 7 heads and America is the 8th head. So we're in the time of the 8th head and we're at the time of the end of the 8th head. So it says even he is the 8th and is of the 7, because it's not, it came out of the 7, and goeth into perdition, because once America was established and set up, as, through the Constitution, and before that, as Elder Pastor Hart brought out in another lesson, the Articles of Confederation, they established America, as a government. And from that point, it grew and grew and grew to what you see today. But from the inception of it, from the moment that they started to plant themselves here in America, this place was set up by the Heavenly Father as a place of destruction, because this would be the place that would corrupt the whole earth. Now, don't get me wrong, there's always been corruption, there's always been wickedness, but America intensified all of that. And all nations are following behind the ways of America. All right. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which shows you that these are smaller governments, which the 10 horns is a representation of what used to be known as the EEC, the European Economic Community. And then later they changed it to the EU, which is the European Union. And it started off with 6 member nations. And eventually, when the next year after that, in 1959, they set up headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, and at that headquarters they had planted 10 flagpoles outside of the headquarters. Since then, it's grown, to I'm not even sure how many they have now in the EU, but now their flag has 12 stars on it, but it's really 10, because when you look at it, the UK, which is the United Kingdom, and Ireland, they're pretty much one, and Spain and Portugal are one, but they made it into 12 because they're trying to offset the prophecy. All right, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So we just identified that this beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns, this which is scarlet colored in Revelation 17, and this dragon with the 7 heads and 10 horns is a conglomeration of nations coming together, empires coming together, that make up this beast system. See? So when we read that, the red dragon, Satan, because when we go to Revelation chapter 20 and verse 2, it says, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. It's identifying the same dragon that we're reading about as that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan. So this conglomeration of nations is a representation on the earth of the spiritual demon Satan. But they are the spiritual counterpart, and they are pushing Satan's agenda, which is the Most High's agenda on the left-hand side. All right. So if he was sincere, which he doesn't know, but he's not sincere anyway, because he's the devil. I'm talking about vocab. I'm talking about Shaft. I'm talking about vocab. He would come to the conclusion that Satan that he spoke about and the world coming into servitude under him is talking about the ones that are in power, which are the Edomites. And the Bible identifies the Edomites as the wicked. And the Bible also identifies that the wicked have power and control over the earth, because the Most High said the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. So if they are in control, if they are in power, and the Bible says that the wicked would be in power, and then the Bible also identifies the nation of Edom as the wicked. So who are the people that are ruling the planet Earth today? By process of elimination, the Edomites. And this is why in Isaiah 34, Isaiah 63, and 2nd Ezra 6, it speaks about when Yahushua comes back, he's coming back to visit, these Edomites. In 2nd Ezra 6, it speaks about Esau being the end of the world, because they would be ruling at the very end of the world when Yahushua comes back to take them down. So going back to Revelation, right, we identified that this red dragon, Satan, is a conglomeration of nations, of Edomite nations, and this is what's going to be fighting against the Lord, Yahushua, and the angels when they come back. And that's when we jump down to the 7th verse. It says, and there was war in what? In heaven. And this word throws people off. They're thinking it's the heaven of the heavens, right? But we identify through the scriptures, once again, that there are more than one heaven. Let's go to the book of 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter. And I'll start at 1. It is not expedient for me, doubtless, to glory. I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. I knew a man in Yahushua above 14 years ago. He's speaking about himself. Whether in the body I cannot tell, or whether out of the body I cannot tell. The Most High knoweth. Why? Because he was stoned to death, and they dragged him outside of the city and threw him outside of the city and left him for dead. And then he says, such an one caught up to what? To the third heaven. So the place which is called the fourth dimension, where the Most High and the angels dwell, even though the Most High is omnipotent, he's omnipresent. That particular realm, the third or fourth dimension, is the third heaven. So if that is identified as the third heaven, and that's the highest you can go, the heaven of the heavens, where are the other two heavens at? And the scriptures say in Genesis, the first chapter, right, Genesis 1:14, and the power said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. Now, the firmament is what? The ozone layer. So the ozone layer is where? It's up in the sky. So this would be the second heaven. When you go up into the sky, where the firmament is, then you have space. That's all a part of the second heaven. And the first heaven would be on earth, which is the rulerships of the earth, because the earth, the Hebrew word for the earth back then, not the Hebrew word for earth itself, that's aratazah, but the Hebrew word for the earth, not earth itself, but the name of the earth was Eden, from the Hebrew word Aidan, which means paradise or joy. So when we read here, the 2 Peter 3:5, for this they willingly are ignorant of, meaning these scoffers, that by the word of the Most High the heavens were of old. What heavens? It's not talking about where the Most High is, the third heaven. It's not talking about the second heaven up in the sky in space. It has to be talking about the heaven on the earth, identifying by what's written here in the scripture. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of the Most High the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. So letting you know that this heaven is on the earth, standing out of the water and in the water, because those empires from the past were destroyed by the flood. The rulerships that were back then, whereby the world that then was, keeps being overflowed with water, perished. So this was on the earth. This didn't happen up in the skies. This didn't happen in the fourth dimension, the third heaven. So where did this happen? This happened on the earth. It says, but the heavens and the earth, which are now, meaning here, the rulerships. Because whenever you're in rulership, you're in a lofty position, just like Capernaum was exalted to heaven. Was it actually a city in heaven? No, it was a city on the earth that lived deliciously. They were well to do. That's why the scriptures say that when the saints get back into the kingdom, they're going to be singing aloud upon their beds in the glory of the Most High, because we're going to be back in that lofty position. It says, but the heavens and the earth which are now by the same word are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and the perdition of ungodly men. So you have three classifications of heaven. So what heaven is this speaking about? Well, we know it can't be talking about the third heaven, up in where the Most High dwells, because that's in total order. And ain't no way that Esau can get there. Esau can't even get past the ozone layer. They could only go so far. They can't get into space. So what heaven is this talking about? And there was war in heaven. It's not talking about the earth. It's really talking about the actual skies, where the planes are flying back and forth. That's why it says, I will exalt my throne above the stars of the Most High. I will be like the Most High. So they actually went up into heaven by way of flight. And now they have fighter jets. They have drones. They have helicopters. They have different technology that can fly. So this particular battle, or this particular war, or this heaven is talking about, in the sky. All right, because when Yahushua and Michael and the angels come back, they're coming to do battle, because there's going to be war waging. There's going to be this gigantic war, which the scriptures call World War III. And in that, Yahushua and the angels are going to come back, and these nations that are fighting against each other are going to stop that war and fight against the Lord. And before we read any more, let's go to Revelation chapter 19. Right, so here in Revelation 19:19 it says, and I saw the beast, which is the conglomeration of these nations, and the kings of the earth, which are the other nations that have military. Because remember, in Isaiah 34, the Lord said he's going to gather the Lord's beef is with these armies. It says, and I saw the beast, which is Esau, his whole system, America, and all of those different so-called European nations gathered together, right? Which is represented by NATO and the EU, and the kings of the earth, which are the other nations, and their armies, gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. So this is dealing with this Revelation 19:19 explains Revelation 12:7. So they say that this particular war is going to be Michael and the angels fighting against Satan and the angels, the spiritual demon Satan. But here it's saying that they're going to fight against Yahushua and against, Michael and the angels, against kings of the earth, armies. Talking about the spiritual demon, because the beast is not identified as Satan. And when it is identified, it is identified as these nations coming together in these empires that are Satan, because the word Satan simply adversary. These are the adversaries of the Lord, because they oppose everything that the Lord said righteousness. All right. Going back, it says in Revelation 12, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the fought and his angels and prevailed not. What is the dragon? That would be a representation of, the beast system also, because the dragon is actually the Roman Empire, but in this case, you have America and you have the conglomeration of these so-called European nations that make up the dragon, because of the third verse identifies a great red dragon as having 7 heads and 10 horns, and the Roman Empire is included in this, which today America would be the revival of the ancient Roman Empire. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. Right, because they're not going to have any rulership upon the earth. Let's go to Isaiah 14 and 21. And this is why, like Elder Pastor says, when you start questioning, see, if you let Vocab run his mouth, he's in his lane, you know, and then eventually he's gonna stumble. But when you corner that rat, yes, I said R-A-T, rat. When you corner that rat and you start asking them questions, like Apostle Star said, he starts touching his glasses. You know, those are the magic Google glasses. He's trying to, you know, summon the demonic spirits, you know, and, you know, that's his twitch. You know, like when you're playing poker and everybody has a staunch stone face, but then there's certain things that people do to give away that, yeah, this person is bluffing or whatever the case is. That's Vocab's, you know, that's one of his pantomimes. All right, so Isaiah 14 and 21, prepare slaughter for his children for the iniquity of their fathers. That's Esau being prepared for slaughter for what their forefathers did. Why? Because they are their forefathers. Because the scriptures say that the son shall not pay for the sins of the father, and vice versa. So if that's the case, why is the Lord saying prepare slaughter for his children for the iniquity of their fathers? Because they are their fathers coming back. The soul that sinneth, it shall die. It says that they do not rise, nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. So once this goes down, this war in heaven, which is in the skies, it says, and prevail not, meaning Satan didn't prevail against Yahushua and Michael and the angels. Neither was their place found any more in heaven, meaning they're not going to have any more planes to fly around, but neither will they be inhabiting and settling and colonizing worlds on the planet. You know, that's what it's talking about. So it says back in Revelation 12:9, and the great red dragon was cast out, meaning this whole beast system, because this is the final empire that Daniel saw in Daniel the 2nd chapter, Daniel the 7th chapter. We're reading about it here in the book of Revelation, because once this goes down, this is why in Revelation 19 it identifies Yahushua. Let's go back to that. Revelation 19, it identifies Yahushua as 16th verse, and he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Why is that? Because he's going to be credited with taking down all these kings. Because remember, you had the Assyrians. Then when the Babylonians took them over, it became the Assyrio-Babylonian Empire. Then you had the Medo-Persian Empire that took them down. Now the Medes came up first, but the Persians became greater. So they became the Medo-Persian Empire. Then the Greeks came and took them down. Then the Romans came and took the Greeks down, which it became the Greco-Roman Empire. So each empire that came up and fell was absorbed into the next empire. And they became what? Tributary. So when Yahushua comes back, all of these nations are going to be tributary to him. That's why I called him King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So it says, and the great red dragon was cast out, that old serpent. What else was I reading? Okay, that was it. And the great red dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. So we're reading about it here. We've read about it in Revelation 20. This is all identifying. But if you have no idea of what the Bible is talking about, so see, it's talking about the devil, it's talking about Satan. That's what it represents. But we just read in Revelation 17 that these 7 heads and 10 horns are a representation of kings and rulerships. Mountains. Well, it said mountains. Yeah, well, what is a mountain? You know, mountain is the highest, you know, plane on the earth. Just this is why when Ezra saw that great chariot that Yahushua was coming on, he compared it to a mountain and he looked on the earth to see where it came from. So a mountain is the highest peak, geographically on the earth. And this is why you have something called the G7, which are the 7 top nations gathering together for a meeting. Let me just see something. Right, here we go. G7 Summit. Its members, history, purpose, and meeting summaries. What happens when the world's top 7 leaders meet? All right. It says G7 Summit is annual meeting of Group 7 leaders. It's hosted by the G7 president for that year. The summit doesn't have any legal or political authority, but when these 7 world leaders agree on something, it has the power to shift the direction of global economic growth. Says the G7 member countries are the United States, UK, France, Japan, Italy, and Canada. We know that this isn't the red beat because Japan is not part of those 7 heads. Somebody said, well, look, it's G7, that's 7 heads right there. No. Have Japan in there. Japan is not part of that conglomeration of the book of Revelation. This would be the kings, what we read in Revelation 19. It says the first countries were the originals of the G6. The first summit was held in Boulay, France in 1975, joined in 1976, the G7. In 1997, Russia joined, making it it used to be the G8, but then kicked out. In 2013, the G8 became the G7 once again when Russia invaded Crimea. The other G8 members imposed sanctions against Russia, including exclusion from the G8. So that's why it went back to the G7. All right, so this is the world top leaders, the world top governments coming together for a meeting to change the economic growth of the world. Setting policies, so on and so forth. So going back to Revelation 12:9, and the great red dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. So the Edomites, which deceiveth the whole world, right? Because the first thing they did, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. It says he covered the faces of the judges thereof. And when this great red dragon was let loose from his prison sentence, the very first thing they did was to go around the world and deceive the whole world. It says he was cast out into the earth and his angels were cast out with him. So if you have no idea, that whole mythology or fable of Satan being cast out of heaven, you would falter because it seems like that's what it's saying. But no, what it's saying is when the Lord comes back, he's gonna demolish them planes and them Edomites in them planes or helicopters or wherever they may be and send them crashing down to the earth. Pretty much. We go to 2nd Ezra 13. It's all there. Verse 3, and I beheld, and lo, that man waxed strong with the thousands of heavens. We read the same thing, thousands of heaven, the same thing. Yahushua, Michael, the angels coming back, right? And he turned his countenance to look. And when he turned his countenance to look, all the things trembled that were seen under him. Why? Because these Edomites and these Moabites and these different nations that are fighting in the air are going to look and be nervous. And whensoever the voice went out of his mouth, all they burned that heard his voice, like as the earth faileth when it feeleth the fire. And that's when they're going to come falling, and their place will not be found in heaven anymore, because Esau will not go back into the skies. No other nation will go back up into the skies unless you punt them up there. And after this I beheld, and lo, there was gathered together a multitude of men, not Satan, but men, a multitude of men. We just read about this in Revelation 19. Out of number, Armageddon, Harmageddon, mountain of the troops. from the four winds of the heaven. Why? Because you're going to have nations fighting this war from all parts of the earth. To subdue the man that came out of the sea, Yahushai. But I beheld, and lo, he graved himself a great mountain and flew up upon it. This is the chariot. But I would have seen the region or place whereout the hill was graven, and I could not. And after, because it wasn't an actual mountain. And after this I beheld, and lo, all they which were gathered together, men, to subdue him, were sore afraid. And yet there's fight, because they're going to be fighting an angelic power. Yahushua said, I will not meet thee as a man. And lo, as he saw the violence of the multitude that came, he neither lifted up his hand, nor held sword, nor any instrument of war. But only I saw that he sent out of his mouth as it had been a blast of fire, and out of his lips a flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast out sparks and tempests, which this is dealing with the lasers coming out of the chariots. And they were all mixed together, the blast of fire, the flaming breath, and the great tempest, and fell with violence upon the multitude which was prepared to fight. Of what? Multitude of men. And burned them up every one, so that upon a sudden of an innumerable multitude, nothing was to be perceived, but only dust and smell of smoke. When I saw this, I was afraid. You see? So that's what this is all about. Being cast into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him, meaning his planes, his technology. These are the angels and the powers of Esau. Just like Yahushua has his powers, which are the angels, the chariots. See? But if you have no understanding, you just read this face value, you're going to go with the fable, the mythology that they push out there. But within the same book of Revelation, it explains what this great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns is, which is identified even in this same chapter as that old serpent, the devil and Satan. You see? So with that, I pray that you brothers and your few sisters have been edified. This has been a lamb back off of Elder Apostle Tar's video. I was listening to it and, spirit hit me. So I said, you know what, let me just jump on it. And, we have a saying here, strike while the iron's hot, And if the iron's hot, just strike, because if you don't strike while the iron's hot, it could be a possibility that, you might have to wait for the next strike. So Barakatah Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, for the inspiration for this lesson and all other lessons. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say Shalom.